Hey everyone, I want to take just a couple minutes to go through really what I see as a very, very important factor as we're coming into the political season. And I want to take a minute to really explain why and point out to you that right off the bat, I'm not pushing any one particular candidate. There's just far too many issues for everybody to agree on. And as we all know, or we should be able to clearly see, there is no perfect candidate, because you may agree with them on some things and you may not agree with them on other things, but it's unlikely that everybody is going to agree with everybody on the same topics. But I want to point out something that I do hope will start to make you think a little bit differently in terms of how you choose who you're looking for, and what are the core philosophies behind that person. And this one topic in regards to vaccinations is a really good insight into the real underlying principles of the person. And the reason why I say that is this. If you look back historically, of course, we can learn a lot from history. What you'll find is the story of Nazi medicine. That if you've ever looked into this topic, and if you haven't, it's fascinating. But Nazi medicine was considered just the pinnacle of health science. That they were going through a period of medical revolution. In fact, Hitler himself was actually called the Great Doctor because of his policies that were leading towards a better public health system. They did all kinds of things that were related to public health, and removing mercury and lead from all products, and improving sanitation systems, and policies to take care of pregnant women with impeccable care and babies, as long as they were not genetically flawed, of course. But those who were a part of the accepted society were taken very well care of by the system. And so it was as no surprise that something like 75% of German physicians actually became part of the Nazi Party because of the underlying philosophy. The underlying philosophy that there is a truth, that there is a right way, that there is there is a norm, and when you deviate outside of that norm, that's what causes all the problems of society. In other words, mental retardation and illness, and the elderly, and Jews, and anybody else that had varying political views from them. So this was the foundation of all of it. And when it all came down, what you had occur was that Nazi physicians became members of the state instead of the doctor to the patient. Okay, they were. It was a slow process transition where they became more. What should I say? They were more responsible to the state than they were to you as the patient, and maintaining your personal health freedoms. So that is a very, very stark contrast, and you can see where that led to from what it says in our Declaration of Independence. Our Declaration of Independence says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you think about that one for a second, and you look at this idea that's being put out there, that public health is more important than personal freedom. And what you have to look at on that side of the coin, you can see the very small twist in a concept that, my personal freedoms are important too. Therefore, if you're putting me in danger, then you should give up your rights in order to protect mine. And, while that seems valiant, while that seems reasonable, when you really step back and you think about it, all individuals have certain unalienable rights, and that only ends when it interferes with another person's unalienable rights. In other words, I don't have a right to go out and murder somebody because that infringes upon their inalienable rights. I mean, it's really obviously that simple, but they try to put the terms of murder on the same as your child being unvaccinated and going into a public park and playing with other kids. When the reality is this has a very tangible result. This one, nobody has examples of. Yet we can argue this point all day long, but because it's accepted as a public health government mandated standard, therefore forget about all that other stuff, because where science becomes politicized, it loses its real intrinsic values, because now it becomes a function of the state rather than a function of truth and evidence. So, when you look at this issue of giving up your personal rights for the matter of public health, it just becomes a very, very easily distorted issue, which, if you look at it again from the standpoint of inalienable rights, it's real simple to come up with standards around that where, if there's an outbreak in a school, let's say that there is an outbreak of measles and 3 kids get found that they have measles, it's perfectly reasonable for any of us who don't have our kids vaccinated to ask those kids to stay home until all is clear. And in fact, my guess is you won't even have to ask them, because we're going to keep our kids home anyways. It's also reasonable to say that if those kids are in that population, it should also be reasonable, should I say, to ask everybody to stay home, because you really don't have any proof knowing which kids are immune and which are not. But if you want to play that standpoint as well from the more scientific side, when your kids get vaccinated, you have a shedding period of sometimes up to 21 days. But let me ask you this, do you keep your kids at home when other kids in the classroom have recently gotten vaccinated? Because I see cases quite often where I get emails or text messages saying that, I just had somebody over playing at my house, and then the mom told me that their kid was just vaccinated yesterday, and now I'm freaking out that they're going to get sick from this other kid. I mean, totally opposite of what you would hear in the media, but this is what's true in the science, is that, you do have a shedding period because you now got exposed through the vaccination, so now you're a risk to other people. And so, you look at this whole gamut of things, and what you really see is we should be coming up with policies that protect the rights of everybody, not putting policies in place that will eventually and inevitably end up in, those kids aren't vaccinated and there's an outbreak, so we're going to go and put them in a holding facility until everything calms down and gets in the clear, otherwise known as a concentration camp. Because this is how things get distorted when you take out individual freedoms. So on that note, I want to go through a list of the candidates real quick and give you just kind of an overhead view of which ones, first of all, which ones believe that personal freedoms end at public health, therefore which ones I personally cannot hold my philosophy to theirs, versus those that seem to be leaning towards more protecting personal freedoms, at least on this regard. And of course, like I said, there's a whole gamut of issues out there, and I'm not saying any one particular candidate you should vote for or should not vote for. I'm saying on this one issue, you can get an overhead view of what are their ideas of personal freedoms. So, first of all, starting with the ones that their personal freedoms end at public health, the first one on the list is Dr. Ben Carson, who of course is a medical doctor. He is on the board of a vaccine company producing a vaccine for supposedly for colon cancer, and he thinks we should not allow philosophical, religious, or other reasons to interfere with mandatory policy. So he is likely the only Republican candidate that is completely for forced vaccination, meaning that you do not have a choice, that your personal freedoms have no bearing on public health, that you should have zero rights when it comes down to that. So I know a lot of people are excited about Dr. Ben Carson. It makes a lot of sense on a lot of other issues, but because of this, I simply can't hold to his standard. Hillary Clinton, the earth is round, the sky is blue, and hashtag vaccines work. That's something that she tweeted here recently. She supports fully mandatory policy, just like President Obama just talked. They talked in the past about connection between autism and vaccinations, and that they needed to really search out for the truth behind it and find the connection when they were campaigning, but then completely flip their thoughts when it comes to a different set of scenarios. So obviously I can't throw my vote for them. Rick Perry signed the executive order in Texas. Executive order in Texas. You remember this? Forcing the brand new untested Gardasil vaccine to like sixth graders. After which ties were found to the manufacturer, where he was actually getting funded by the manufacturer, and they ended up overturning this in the state and put in place laws in the state of Texas that actually guard the patient's freedom to make choices from this point forward. So I guess, it actually turned into a good thing, because now parents have a little bit more protection bolstered up in terms of vaccinations because of that debacle. But clearly, he's off my list. Marco Rubio believes all children should be vaccinated, and there is no evidence linking vaccinations to autism. Of course, I understand, just like most politicians, just like any individual, you're only going to know what you've been exposed to. You only know what you know, right? And so I'm sure he's never had any reason to question whether there's a connection there or not. But he did say, simply put, that vaccinations don't cause autism, so all kids should be vaccinated, period. End of story. Bobby Jindal, vaccines have been tested and proven to protect public health, and calls opposing views fear-mongering. So I don't think there's any question about what his stance is on there, that he would require that either you get vaccinated or you are just a fear-monger, and you don't have a right to an opinion. Lindsey Graham, spokesman, says would reject any effort to stop vaccinations until somebody can show him there is scientific reason to do so. Well, Mr. Graham, you might have my vote if you let me send you plenty of evidence, because we can certainly accommodate that, no problem. It's a matter of opening up our eyes, because it's pretty much everywhere. Scott Walker worked with Hallmark to send new parents cards urging them to vaccinate their infants, but has said it's up to the states. Saying it's up to the states, that's great until they, it seems that the public interest or the majority wants you to enforce vaccinations. And considering he's already working with Hallmark to send parents cards to push it, I think it's pretty safe to say that he would probably go for forcing vaccinations. That's just my thought. Mike Huckabee, he criticized Michelle Bachmann for her comments about vaccines and retardation, that there was a connection between those, and seems more on the pro side, though, is probably more questionable. A lot of people have the concept that, well, because he's a Christian, though, that he would protect that. I'm telling you, not so, because I know plenty of Christians who will openly, say, what, this is just the way it's got to be, and I'm fully pro-vaccination, and your religious affiliation has absolutely nothing to do with your health choices. I teach a class on this, and you can clearly see most of the stuff that we teach is not conventional in terms of religiosity. Rick Santorum has financial backing of the pharmaceutical companies, so pretty sure he's not going to let that go. John Kasich issued an executive order in his state allowing pharmacists to administer the MMR vaccine during the measles outbreak. So, I almost say that tongue-in-cheek. So I'm sure that CVS absolutely loves not needing referrals in order to boost their sales. I mean, you go in and, hey, would you like your measles shot? Well, I haven't seen my doctor. Oh, no problem. You know what? Our pharmacist can give you another one. You don't even need a prescription. Just come on, step around the counter right here. Bernie Sanders, a lot of people are getting really excited about Bernie Sanders, wanting to kick up minimum wage to $15 an hour and free education for everybody. Nobody knows where that's coming from, but it sounds good. But he also agrees that personal freedom ends where public health begins. So, he doesn't want his grandchildren endangered by your children. So, these are all the candidates so far that kind of lean towards, it's pretty clear to see that they are not for personal freedoms, that they believe that the public interest, just like the Nazi party, believes that the public is much more important than the individual rights. So here's the more that lean towards pro-medical freedom, okay? And in other words, understanding that your personal rights really should be at least more considered, at least on this issue. Chris Christie has commented about vaccines' possible link to autism and is pro-choice for parental rights. He says that, and he was criticized all over the media, just like most of these people. You'll find that they were actually criticized in the media and by other people for giving their opinion that it should be the parent's choice, that it should not be the parent's choice. They're a danger, they're a threat. So stick us all in a concentration camp and be done with it, right? But anyways, he does believe that it is pro-choice and parents' rights. I don't agree with everything that he says. I don't think I would send my vote his way. I don't know at this point yet. There's just too many issues, but this is the one I'm targeting. Rand Paul was a 20-year member of a conservative doctors group opposing mandatory vaccinations. So I'm pretty sure that, after 20 years of involvement in that group, that he's not completely flipped his view. He has commented about the link between neurological damage and vaccines and supports a completely voluntary policy. He's also one of the only candidates to openly admit he followed a staggered schedule on his own children. So he didn't just go out and vaccinate all of them all at once. He was concerned about them being given all at once. On the other hand, he is actually a medical doctor. And he has, after he was getting pushed on the issue about some of the statements that he had made and getting all the lambasting that they get when they put this view out there, he tweeted out a picture of him getting a booster vaccine to basically ward off and calm the spin that was down, so that, here I am getting my shot, so see, you can't talk to me now. I don't know that I agree with that. I like Dr. Paul, but come on. Donald Trump has said that vaccines cause, and he's flamboyant. Nobody has to argue with that. But he has said that vaccines cause horrible autism. He's called them monster shots. And he said children are not horses. So I think it's pretty clear that he's anti-vaccine. Although, the more calm down, once his aides and his campaign managers get a hold of him, of course, all those comments kind of try to be restricted a little bit. But I think it's pretty sure from his comments that he is not for vaccinations. Then there's Ted Cruz. Good faith and religious convictions were appropriate and policy should be left up to the state. So, this one is even a little bit more of a tricky subject because, again, it says good faith and religious convictions. There are some people who think that you should be required to give your statement of faith and have it within the standards of that faith that it is against vaccinations in order to get an exemption. So in other words, to get a religious exemption of vaccinations, you should have to claim that you're a Scientologist. And the reality is that if you look at the definition, the textbook definition of faith or religion, it's your personal set of beliefs and convictions. It's not necessarily a denomination. So, my beliefs are that my Creator endowed me with certain unalienable rights and that, God made me well and that I don't need outside things to make me well and complete. I think God gave me a complete body from the inside out. And it is much better, as B.J. Palmer said, do you have more faith in a spoonful of medicine or a knife than in the power that animates the living world? I don't think so. So that issue on the religious convictions, and really bringing it down to that one's tough. So I'm not really sure how that one lays out. Then Carly Fiorina, she's the ex CEO of HP, says parents have a right to make these choices, and her daughter was actually bullied by a school nurse for not wanting to vaccinate. So this is now personal. There's a personal issue where she sees the bullying that actually happens with this. And, yet, of course, she's getting lambasted as well from people saying that if here you are running a technology company and you don't even know that public health is a matter of importance. I mean, just people will throw silliness all over the place, but look at all of this way. Okay, these are the candidates, and I may have missed a few because there's 18,000 of them that are all running right now. But here's the big picture. Pay attention to this issue and really think about this, because how a candidate thinks about each individual's rights will eventually make a big difference in their public policy. Because, are they really are they gonna take care to look out for your constitutional rights, or are they gonna throw out the Constitution in order for public good, right? Whatever they determine that to be. And on that, you're treading on dangerous territory. So I hope this helps you. You might want to go back and watch this a few more times and do some research on your own. By all means, I urge you to continue to seek out the information on these individuals and really know what they stand for, and think about why. What is the underlying philosophy? Not just what are they offering to do. Their philosophy will drive not just what things they've decided to do now, but will drive their long-term agendas as well. So always think about the most important thing to an individual is what their philosophy is. Hope this helps.